Good day. I'm Liesl Pretorius, legal advisor with Freedom of Religion South Africa, or 4SA for short. Today, I'm joined with my colleague, Daniela Ellerbeck, and we will look at a topic that for many is close to heart and close to home. That is, how are parental rights and religious freedom, particularly parents' rights to raise their own children in accordance with their own beliefs and values, protected in the basic education sector in South Africa? Joining us for this important discussion, we are privileged to have Juané from Merwe. Now, Juané is Deputy Chief Executive Officer and also the Head of Legal Services with FEDSAS, the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools. Juané, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Liesl, and thank you so much for having me. It's an honor for me to have a discussion on this important topic this afternoon.
So much looking forward to this conversation, and let's just jump right in. Our first question will be, Juané, tell us a bit about FEDSAS. Not everybody might be familiar with the organization. Why do you exist? What is it that you do?
Oh, thanks, Liesl. Now, FEDSAS, as you've said, is a school governing body organization. We have a national footprint. We have member schools all over the country. And perhaps just to share our vision of FEDSAS is to preserve and to promote a quality of education in all schools of the Republic. And we know that our school governing bodies play a very important role in creating opportunities for learners, ensuring that we deliver quality education to all learners. So FEDSAS focuses on the development of capable school governing bodies to ensure that we can achieve this vision. We also believe in the autonomy of school governing bodies, and therefore we also strive to expand the rights of school governing bodies. All of this to achieve this vision, we can preserve and promote the quality of education for all learners in South Africa.
Quality of education is so important. It cannot be understated overstated rather. Juané, you mentioned school governing bodies quite a bit. For those of us who are not familiar with the basic education sector, perhaps we don't have children in schools, what is a school governing body exactly? What are their role? What is their function?
Well, perhaps I should just first explain how a governing body is comprised. First of all, we have our ordinary public schools and then our special schools. Now, ordinary public schools governing body would be consist of your school principal, your staff at your school, which would consist of your educators and non-educators, your learners if they are in grade 8 or higher, and then very importantly, the parent component of your school governing body that will be the majority of the members of your school governing body. That's your ordinary public schools. And then when you look at the schools for learners with special education needs, that governing body can also consist of representatives of different sponsoring bodies or organizations of disabled persons or people who are experts in the fields of special needs education. Now, this governing body is responsible for the governance of the school where they are elected. So the Schools Act sets out the functions of that governing body. This governing body stands in a position of trust towards the schools, but they are mainly responsible to see to the governance of the school where they are elected.
So you mentioned that in an ordinary public school, parents are the majority of the school governing body. So obviously it is recognized that parents play a very important role when it comes to the education of their children. So let's turn to parents' rights. What are parents' rights?
Well, that's a very important question, Liesl. And to answer that, I think the most important document, or the document that I would like to refer to, is the White Paper on Education and Training. Now, that's the document that preceded the drafting of the South African Schools Act. That's also the document that the state would consult if they would consider revising the Schools Act, what they must consider when they are faced with problems and difficult situations to guide them in making decisions on resolving different issues that they might have. Now, this document actually sets out the obligation and the rights of the parents very beautifully. It states that parents have the right and they have the primary responsibility for the education of the children. The primary responsibility does not vest within the department, it doesn't vest within the educators of the school, it vests within the parent of the specific child. And very closely related to this responsibility is the right of the parent to be consulted by state authorities, specifically with respect to the form that the education should take, and also the right to take part in governance. Now, when we talk about the form that education, or the form of education, and the right of the parents to be consulted in the form of education that's best for their child, this would definitely include the right of choice to language. Parents can decide to have their child educated in their own mother tongue. Very important also is the right to the culture and the religious foundation of the child's education. And definitely, of course, it must be remembered that right must be considered with due respect to the rights of other children and the rights of their own growing child. So in a nutshell, if I have to highlight the greatest or the biggest right that the parents do have, it would definitely be the rights as set out in White Paper 1. Perhaps if I could just expand a bit on some of the rights that is set out in the Schools Act. There's also a whole list of other rights that the parents do have. It would definitely include the right of the parents to take part in the policy making processes of the school as well. We know that parents have the right to, or they must, or actually the Schools Act sets out the obligation on parents to approve the budget of the school every year, so they have a great role to play there. Also, parents have the right to be present at the disciplinary hearing of a child. So there's a whole lot of rights that's set out in the Schools Act, but that all of those rights mainly contributes to this primary responsibility of the parent to ensure that the child receives the education that they are entitled to as set out in our Constitution.
So yeah, so basically the white paper is the guideposts, apart from the Constitution, that is what informs it, and it sets out parents' rights so beautifully. And with the School Act, the school governing body is basically the practical vehicle through which parents' rights are actually practically protected in the school. So that's why they are so incredibly important. And I think it's so important that parents realize that involvement in a school governing body is actually non-negotiable.
No, definitely, Lisa, if I can comment on that. I mean, that's we've moved away from a system, from an autocratic education system, towards a system of democracy. We instill the right to realize the right to education within the parents as well. That's no longer just an obligation that vests with the state. That's an obligation that's now instilled within our school governing bodies to ensure, and of which the majority of parents form part, to ensure that we realize that right to education of our children. So our parents have a great role to play in that regard.
So, Juané, I mean, you said this beautifully now, that we've moved away from an autocratic system towards a democratic system in schools. But in my experience, most parents are not aware of this, and they're not aware of their rights. They're not aware of the big role that school governing bodies play. And why do you think this is, and what can be done about it?
Well, Daniela, I think, for me, I think the biggest reason is due to the fact of lack of information. And when I say lack of information, it's because our education laws and regulations can be complex. It means that parents might not necessarily understand what's written in our laws. That's the one component. And then also parents might not have access to information about their rights and also, their responsibilities as well. So lack of information is one of the issues that there might be. Then also limited communication. That's one big frustration, is the fact that the state doesn't always necessarily properly communicate to parents. From experience, we've seen that with school governing body elections, there is very little advocacy coming from the state to educate and to update parents as to what their rights are in that process. As well, sometimes, and we know our schools are not always that innocent. Schools also doesn't always necessarily effectively communicate to parents. So a lack of proper communication channels and insufficient efforts would definitely a problem. Yeah, so and I think perhaps if I can add one more issue as well, time constraints. We also know parents are quite busy, irrespective of the fact that there might be a lack of information. Parents are sometimes quite busy, so they don't have the time to educate themselves, to go and do the research to understand what their rights are. So those are some of the barriers that we sometimes tend to see why parents aren't aware of their rights.
So the bottom line, Juané, seems to be that parents must become involved, as I think we've mentioned before, in these schools. Now, what are the different ways that parents can do this?
Well, Liesl, I'm so glad you asked this question, because this is one of the things we struggle most with at our member schools, is the fact that parents are absent at their schools. When we talk to educators, the one thing that they highlight and the one thing that they ask is to get the support of the parents and get the parents involved within or in the education of their own child. We see that parents aren't involved in their children's homework. We see that parents do not attend parent and teacher meetings. So one thing is just to get the parent involved and to get the parent to realize that they remain primarily responsible for the child's education. And then secondly, want to urge parents to participate within your school's committees. We know schools have a lot of different committees, and you as a parent can definitely get involved and share your expertise and your experiences on the different school committees that there might be. Do attend school events. We know every year parents complain about high school fees, but then we don't see them at the parent budget meetings. We don't see the parents at the school governing body elections. So parents must be involved at those meetings as well. And very important as well, parents must be proactive in expressing their voice, in expressing their views. If they have any concerns, or if they don't feel that they're happy with the administration of the school or administration at the education department, they must voice their concerns. And therefore, it's very important for parents to engage in the parent communication channels that the schools have available. Make sure that you read the newsletters, communicate via email if you're not happy, and avail yourself to serve on the school governing body if you feel that you can truly contribute to the governance of the school and to playing a role in that regard.
Yes, and I think that any school would be grateful for parents who are proactively involved and contribute to the school in a meaningful way, because that means your school is situated in a community that cares and people are aware of the needs and the wants, and so you just have a more cohesive, better school community. And in the end, your child will receive a better education in a better environment. So everybody benefits from that. So Juané, let's talk about school governing body elections. How do they work, and when are the next school governing body elections taking place?
Liesl, well, first perhaps I should just explain how school governing body elections are regulated. Well, we have 9 different sets of provincial regulations that regulates the election. Currently, the power vests within the head of the education department in every province to determine the process, and that's done through regulations. So each and every province will have a different set of rules and regulations that will govern their process. Perhaps I should just say here that the Bella Bill is looking at revising the Schools Act to have the minister publish the election regulations, and that's definitely something that we at FEDSAS supports. We know that school governing body elections is the 3rd biggest election that we have in South Africa, and therefore we definitely support a single set of regulations that would govern the whole process. If we look at the process, usually the process starts off with a nomination process. That's the same in every province, where parents will have the opportunity to nominate a person who is willing to serve on the school governing body. Immediately thereafter, we will then see the election process take place. Now, most of the provinces, not all, but most of the provincial regulations makes place for either an election meeting a full day election or an online election process. And that's depending on the process or the mode that the school chooses. The parents will then either have the opportunity to physically go to school to cast their vote there, or they will have the opportunity to cast their vote online. Now, we do recommend schools to rather follow the online election process, making it more accessible for all parents to cast their votes. We know that parents that might have a problem with transport to get to school will then also have the opportunity to simply cast their vote through an online election process. Now, the next election, very important, will take place in 2024. The minister did announce the term for the election, and that will be for the whole month of March in 2024, when our governing body elections will then take place. So it's important for schools to start planning now and to start identifying potential candidates that can serve on the governing body, and to encourage parents to come and vote and to make sure that they nominate the parents that they would like to see and to serve on their governing body.
So, Juané, listening to you, the Department of Basic Education is the main government stakeholder and role player in South Africa's basic education sector. And as such, one would expect the department to regularly engage with basic education stakeholders such as FEDSAS, Federation of School Governing Bodies. How important is such meaningful public participation, especially when it comes to departmental policies and other non-policy documents? I mean, we just heard you say that there are 9 different regulations for these school governing body elections. And does such meaningful public participation have an impact on parental rights and on religious freedom in schools, in your opinion?
I think meaningful public participation is of the utmost importance. I think that cannot be overemphasized enough. We've spoken about it, and we've referred to the fact that we've moved away from an autocratic state to one that's democratically governed. So public participation is fundamental to democratic governance. Involving the public in decision-making processes ensures that policies and documents reflects the diverse needs and also the values of the communities. So when we look at a public participation and a democratic governance process and system, that's definitely something that promotes accountability and transparency in decision-making processes, because that also holds government and education authorities responsible for their actions as well. And when we specifically look at parental rights and religious freedoms, we know these are sensitive issues, and it can have profound effects on families and communities. So involving public and having public consultation processes would definitely ensure that the rights are respected and protected in a manner that would definitely reflect a society's values. So yeah, that's very important. So I think one cannot consider a process or the publication of policies and regulations and legislation that governs education in our country without going through a public participation process first.
Juané, thank you for answering. And from what you've said, I get the impression that many parents and also even schools and teachers are not aware that non-policy documents, such as a guideline or a toolkit, for example, is not binding or enforceable. This is an important distinction, is it not?
Yeah, no, definitely, Daniela. When we look at the creation of law, we have to consider the principle of legality, meaning that if there's not a provision in the law that allows, for instance, a department to do something, it cannot be enforced upon parents, upon schools, upon educators. And a lot of times we see that governments sometimes tend to and want to regulate either through policy documents or through different circulars, and then they enforce the documents upon schools to implement. And the problem with that is that we don't have this democratic process that we'd like to see, and then we start to see that individuals govern through circulars, and there's no real persons taking real responsibility for a responsible process in legislating responsibly. And then we tend to see ultra vires and unlawful instructions being implemented onto schools, implemented onto parents, which ultimately affect their rights, the child's right to education, and so forth.
That's very concerning, Juané, and I'm grateful that there are watchdogs such as FEDSAS and others that look out for these things, pick them up, and educate parents about their rights and help parents to stand up for their rights in this regard so that the rule of law is followed and that the democratic process is honored. Now, you're basic holder and you obviously continuously engage with the Department of Basic Education and have done so for many years. What is your biggest concern regarding the protection of parental rights in the basic education sector?
Well, if I have to single out just one concern, I think that would definitely be the issue of meaningful and inclusive involvement in decision processes. Education authorities do not consistently consult parents when specifically developing policies or making changes to policies or legislation which directly affects parental rights. And this would then lead to decisions that do not fully align with the needs of preferences of parents and their community. And in concern, we would need to see a commitment from education authorities to create inclusive and participatory environments that would respect the values of parental rights. And I want to emphasize the use of the wording values. And this can only be achieved through regular consultations and regular consultation, and also effective and effective communication challenges, which would also be sensitive to the different cultural beliefs and religious diversities that we have in South Africa.
Absolutely, Juané. Speaking as an attorney, a legal advisor, freedom of religion, but also as a parent myself, this has been an enlightening conversation, necessary conversation. What we discuss here is so important. If you are a parent, and particularly if you are a parent who is also a religious person, and it is important to you to raise your child in accordance with your own beliefs and values based on your particular faith, whatever it might be, you cannot afford not to understand what your rights are when it comes to the education the child receives. And the bottom line, I think, is that of the simple fact that you are your child's parent, you are the primary educator of your child. That is not negotiable. It is an inalienable right that you have to choose the kind of education that you decide, not the state, not anyone else, is best for your child. And this, of course, includes the cultural and religious basis of that education, and especially in the early years. We hope that our viewers have enjoyed this discussion as much as we did, and that they will find this information not only valuable, but practically useful going forward. And I would say to all parents, save the date. March 2024 will come sooner than you realize. Be prepared for those school governing body elections. Be involved. Juané, to you, I want to say thank you so much for joining for this time and your expertise with us on this very, very important topic.
Thank you very much, Liesl and Daniela. It was a privilege in discussing this important topic this afternoon.
Good day. This is Daniela Ellerbeck, the Legal Advisor to Freedom of Religion South Africa. Remember to like and share this video, and then click on the subscribe button to make sure you never miss our video updates on vital religious freedom issues.